Hey artists, today we are going to shade a sphere. So on my paper, I've started with a circle. Do not stress yourself out about this being an exact perfect circle. If that's gonna bug you, go get a mug from the cupboard or a glass and flip it upside down and trace the circle. But again, it does not have to be a perfect circle. Now, to do this correctly today, I do want you to make it not a teeny tiny circle, so you can kind of see my hand for like size comparison. Only because I want you to really practice your shading, and if you make a teeny tiny circle, you won't really have enough space to do that, because we're going to talk about several different things on our sphere today. The first thing I want you to do is determine where your light source is going to hit your sphere. It could be coming straight down, it could be coming from an angle, it could be coming up from the bottom. That's up to you. I'm going to make my light source kind of coming from this angle, okay? So I'm just going to write light in here so that I know it's my light source, because this is going to help us create shadows and know where those are going to go. Now, a sphere is rounded, duh. So we are going to make our shadows also become rounded. And the first thing I'm going to do is very lightly kind of create a little bit of a, like I said, very lightly circle where my light is going to be the brightest. And I'm going to call this is going to be, you don't have to label this on your paper as long as you guys understand what all these words are. This is going to be the highlight, okay, the very brightest spot. And then I'm going to kind of sketch this out for myself. Kind of like another layer out here. These are going to be something called midtones. I'm going to have another layer back here. These are going to be my shadows on the sphere. And I'm going to leave just a little tiny crescent right here. This is going to be reflected light, and we'll talk about that in a second. I'm also going to draw, if my light's coming from this way, my sphere is going to cast a shadow on the table. So where do you think the shadow would be? Up here, down here, here. Because the light's coming this way, the shadow would actually be cast over here. And because of where my light source is coming, the shadow is not going to be an exact circle, but a little bit more of an oval. Okay, and we're going to call this the cast shadow. It's different than the shadow on the sphere. All right, so now we're going to start coloring or shading. So again, very lightly, if the highlight is my brightest point, around the highlight, I'm going to go ahead and start shading my lightest colors. Now you'll notice that I tend to shade with small circles instead of back and forth marks with my pencil. Sometimes as I get bigger, I do kind of do a little bit of back and forth. But when I do these small circles, it really helps my drawing not look too streaky. It keeps my pencil a little bit more in check so that I don't go wah and go crazy with it. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this a little bit so you can see how things go. Now, one thing I did want to tell you about is this thing called a reflected light. Normally, because of how a sphere would sit on a table, even though this is a cast shadow, there would be some light from the table reflecting back onto the bottom of the sphere. So a lot of times, even though this is real dark right here, for my darkest shadows, there's a little chunk right at the bottom of my sphere here that's going to be a little lighter to reflect some of that light. And it's tiny touches like this that really make your drawings a little more true to life. The other thing I wanted to tell you about before we moved on was when you're shading a sphere, you don't necessarily, even though I drew those rings originally, you don't want to see exact layers of where each shade is. It's more like you want these to be blended a little bit. So sometimes if I have too much of a distinct line, I'll take my pencil and just lightly go over that line to kind of help blend it in. All right, we're ready for the shadow.